Welcome to the Missionary Mobilization Podcast, a resource for Christian leaders who want to increase the number of missionaries around the world. This podcast is a ministry of the Center for Missionary Mobilization and Retention at Trinity Bible College and Graduate School. Visit us online at missionarymobilization.org. Now, here's your host, the founder and director of the Center for Missionary Mobilization and Retention, David Jacob.
Thanks, Tim, and hi, everyone. Welcome to the Missionary Mobilization Podcast. Our goal is to equip and encourage mobilizers and missions pastors around the world. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. And if you would give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, that would help us reach more listeners. And we'd love it if you would share this podcast with a friend. And please let us know how you like the show. And if you've got any suggestions for show topics, just email us at hello@missionarymobilization.org. We'd like to thank Assemblies of God World Missions who help sponsor our podcast today. You can join AGWM's pipeline to receive personal, guided assistance through the process of applying for overseas missions service. The need is great and the opportunities are endless. Visit Assemblies of God World Missions today at agwm.org. Well, Andrew Murray once said, "The man who mobilizes the Christian church to pray will make the greatest contribution to world evangelization in history." And that's why our topic today is mobilizing prayer. And our guest is Kevin Senapatiratne. Kevin is head spiritual pyromaniac for Christ Connection that he founded in 2005. This is after being a lead pastor for 9 years. He's the author of 3 books, including his latest, Not Just for Super Christians. Along with his work at Christ Connection, he's also a member of the Assemblies of God National Prayer Committee and America's National Prayer Committee. So Kevin, welcome to the program today.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I know you spent some time, part of your childhood, growing up as an MK, a missionary kid in Sri Lanka, and just wondering if you could start off by telling us a little bit about that experience.
Well, it's an amazing way to grow up as a child. It's a little bit different from the standpoint of we weren't technically missionaries. My dad came to the United States to go to Bible college, met my mother, so I'm half Sri Lankan, if you were guessing the name there. And so he was here for long enough to become a U.S. citizen, and he gave up his U.S. citizenship to go back as a quote-unquote national, because that was the only way to get into the country. So technically, it's kind of a weird scenario there. But yes, missionary kid. It was there for about 3 or 4 years, and definitely impacted my life as far as long-term understanding, living in a third world country. The heart for missions says it just corrupts you forever, I guess, in the good sense of the word. I forever have a heart for missionaries and missions as a result of that.
That's awesome. Well, I know now with your ministry with Christ Connection, you travel and teach on praying for the world. And just wondering if you could share some insights with our listeners and some lessons that might assist missions pastors, mobilizers, or missionaries. What are some things that you could equip us with as we travel or as we are involved in our own ministries about praying for the world?
Well, kind of the heartbeat that I always try to help myself think about praying for the world, and that kind of flows into everything else. Philippians 1:7, Paul, kind of in the midst of his talking about prayer, says, "It's right for me to feel this way about all of you since I have you in my heart." And I think that's a great starting point for people when they want to grow in prayer, or as a missionary pastor trying to get people, if it gets into your heart, it's not hard to pray. When you think about the people you pray for most, it's people that are close to your heart. And so your family, your friends, those people you automatically pray for. So as a, say, missions pastor, the key to getting people to pray is to get it into their heart. find ways to get missions into their heart so that those missionaries are in their heart, and it won't be hard for them to pray because they'll be connected to them. Or as a mobilizer, if you can think of ways that can get that country that no one seems to care about into a Christian's heart, then all of a sudden it's easier for them to pray. And as they begin to pray, all of a sudden I'm just captivated by the idea that when people get excited about what God's doing in different places around the world, he invites us into that process often. And that's just such a wonderful way to mobilize people, because if they're already excited about it, they're already loving it, and they're going to jump in and say, how can I, even if they can't go themselves, they're going to try and find a way to get involved. And so starting with the heart is, because too many people think prayer is boring, and so starting with the heart connection is a great place to begin.
Absolutely. And I know that you've done some teaching and maybe some writing also on, why people aren't coming to your prayer meetings and that kind of a thing. Can you just give us some tips on that aspect? Maybe the pastors or even missionaries that are listening and are involved with hosting prayer meetings. How can we encourage more participation?
Well, so much with prayer is, I like to say this, people think prayer is boring, intimidating, just about guilt, doesn't accomplish a whole lot, and I'm too busy to pray. That's kind of the 5 things that people think about when they think about prayer. And
it's true.
And so they'd rather be doing anything else. It's kind of root canal and then, and then prayer. Basically, if you're, you're praying, most people think praying, closing your eyes, and you're either sleeping, praying, or you're dead when you close your eyes. So, that's kind of what people think about. And so it's this challenge and so why people don't go to prayer meetings is because it's associated with, one of the reasons is it's associated with all of that they think it's going to be boring, it's going to be dry, or the intimidation factor. I'm going to go to the prayer meeting and they're going to ask me to pray, and I'm going to be sitting next to the super Christian. If you're just listening to this, I'm wearing a superhero shirt. I always wear superhero shirts because people think that prayer is just for the super Christian, that person who has it all together, and and you go to the prayer meeting and only the super Christians show up. That's their thinking, anyways. And so, why even bother? I'm going to sit next to that lovely saint who, when they pray, you're like, whoa, that's impressive. And you're like, I don't want to. And then they're going to ask me to pray next, And so, simply telling people that, if you show up, you don't have to pray out loud. Simply doing that, you could get more people to show up. Or having an end time. Simply saying, we're going to pray from 7 to 8, because people are scared because they're not, comfortable in praying, and they're like, I want to get out of here, at a certain time, but they don't want to be the unspiritual person to leave. And so, if you say we're going to be done at 7, 7 to 8, that's how long we're going to pray, then they're comfortable. So just giving some frameworks like that, making it very clear. One other thing I'd say about prayer meetings is for people who are newer, giving more instruction for newer settings. So 5 minutes may be a long time for someone who's new to the praying world. So do 5-minute segment praying for this country, then 5 minutes of praying by yourself, 5 minutes of praying for this. Break it up. It'll feel uncomfortable for people who are very comfortable with prayer, but say, okay, slow down for the rest of everyone else. We're going to do this a little bit more methodically. So that'd be a few things I'd look at there.
Yeah, those are some great practical tips and insights to help as we plan prayer meetings. And I know a few years ago you participated in an international gathering of prayer and missions leaders in Herrnhut, Germany. What were some of your takeaways from that experience?
Well, it was an amazing opportunity. It was 120 missions and prayer people from around the world. And I basically snuck on the trip. I saw it on something, and I'm like, I don't whatever. I found out about it. I want to go on this thing. And so they had open registration. And so I got on. But anyway, so it's all these missions people from closed countries were there. It was just an amazing gathering there. And I took away a lot, but a couple that would fit with this discussion here. First of all, they realized, these were key leaders in the missions movement, and they realized the connection to prayer. They said, if we're going to finish the Great Commission, we got to get more. The prayer movement and the missions movement need to kind of connect better. And that was kind of their heartbeat with it. Because if the power of prayer, mobilizes people, but it also equips people. But the flip side of that is the prayer movement is pushed forward by having this missions emphasis, by realizing it's not just my local congregation. So many praying people get kind of focused on their little thing, and by having a missions focus, so that bringing those two together is a powerful thing. And Jesus did say, if you want to, pray the Lord of the harvest to raise up laborers. So if we're going to finish this thing, our prayer, and has to go together. The second thing that I'd really highlight was what they were saying, that the Western church was not as involved as compared to a lot of other parts of the world, is children in prayer. How young people, you can go 18 and under, but really even, grade school students, God is stirring around the world. And they highlighted like people in India, these young people that are getting into prayer at that, and they're and so when I think about missionary mobilization and things like that, you can't start too young. Get those young people involved and get them at the heart. My wife is passionate about missions, and it started when she was a kid and felt called to go minister to the crocodiles, because that was her. It's just that you start very young, and I think that's. The heart of our Father is, let the little children come. And so maybe just an encouragement as missionary mobilizations. You're trying to get people there now, but there's also the seeds that you're planting for generations to come.
I can't talk about that enough. I was on a call. We have a quarterly meeting is on Zoom called The Porch, where we invite missions pastors and mobilizers from around the world to come together, and we have an hour, half hour of discussion, and we have breakout sessions. And one of the things that we were talking about just this past week with over I think 40 people that were on with us was this whole idea that when we mobilize people, we tend to want to get that easy fruit and those whom God has called. But so much of mobilization is about the long game, and it's about that long-term investment that maybe we won't see fruit for 10, 15 years. But as we involve children and youth and young adults, that will see God begin to change the culture, change the narrative of our church, of our agency. And so what I know this is a little bit off script. Don't mean to catch you off guard, but could you give us some examples that you've seen as far as helping to young people to be involved in prayer for the world?
Well, one that immediately comes to mind is Every Home for Christ has a resource that it's called the World Prayer Map for Kids, and they give it out for free. You can Every Home for Christ, ehc.org, right on their website, and you can they'll send you, even for a church where they'd send every kid could have, and so it's a prayer map that they can open up, and if you pray for 5 to 7 7 countries. Every day you'll pray for every country of the world over the course of a month. And it's just a simple resource that a kid can say, okay, I can pray for, even if I don't even know how to say, all the stands and, that kind of thing. Right. I can pray for this. And it's a simple entry point. So much of prayer and engaging people, whether that's, a 5-year-old or an 80-year-old, is giving simple steps. Because people, again, the intimidation factor. And so if you let that kid, get involved in praying for, those 5 countries every day, they have an entry point, and who knows what that will birth. They'll think, I'll look up on the map and where is this country? And then 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road, it's a starting point. But even the classic stuff that we do with missions, banquets and stuff like that. Think about how you can incorporate kids into that process. Not wait for, think, these are I need to get the big givers in the room, but also think about how can we get the kids involved in that whole process, let them sit down with the missionary. I was a kid, I loved missionary stories, just hearing those things. And so don't try to think about how to include them in that whole, from start to finish, in just as part of what you're already doing.
Yeah, you reminded me of when one of our kids was younger. We were praying for Afghanistan. He couldn't pronounce it, so he pronounced it Fanat-Ghanistan. And so we still sometimes laugh and refer to Afghanistan as Fanat-Ghanistan, because that's what, he was praying for the people of Fanat-Ghanistan. So those are great times as family and, in ministry, as congregations gather together, young and old alike, to pray. And so getting back to this international gathering in Herrnhut, Germany, this wasn't the first time that there was a gathering like this in Herrnhut. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about the Moravians and the important connection that they made between prayer and missions.
Well, that was kind of the starting point of why I even wanted to go, because Herrnhut, Germany, if you've only heard about Herrnhut, Germany, if you've, like church history person, because it's a small little place. It's when we flew into the Czech Republic, because it's not even, an airport close by. And then you drive through Poland into the small little village in Germany. And I snuck out at one of the sessions just to walk around. It's just small. It's not this big, but in the 1700s, there was a guy by the name of Count Ludwig von Zinzendorf. Now, with the last name Senapatiratne, like I have, I'm just connected to people with Zinzendorf as a last name. It's just awesome. But he had this property where Moravians came who were kind of fleeing from persecution, and so they could stay on his land. And they were a church that didn't get along. And so anyone needs encouragement. There, even back, 1727, there was churches that didn't get along. And so he went around house to house and kind of brought them together in a place of unity. And there was an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, and we actually got to go to one of the churches that still exists today. Has lasted that long, and there was an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, and 24 men and 24 women said, "We're going to commit to praying around the clock." And other people obviously joined later, but for 100 years. They never stopped praying in that place, day and night for 100 years. And what God did as a result of that, for that small of a community, so many missionaries went out from there, because as they began to pray, God began to birth on their heart. One of the groups that went got on a boat and were going across the Atlantic Ocean, and there was a passenger on there who was amazed that as they went through a storm that they were still calm, and he's like, I need to figure what this out. And he went back to England, and his name was John Wesley. He was, and so he came to know the Lord as a result of that. And then there was so many people that got involved in missions that they even sold themselves into slavery to get to places that couldn't be reached otherwise. And I think I read a number like 300 missionaries out of that small little group. And I'm not you're the missions guy, but I've read that all of modern missions as we know it can be traced back to that prayer meeting in some fashion or form because of 100 years going after God. And their theme was that he would receive the glory that he was due, that the Savior would receive his glory. And so it was just an amazing experience to be there and realize what came as a result of that, and to remind us that if we want to see missions happen again, if we want to, there's a place of prayer that is involved in all of that.
It's absolutely remarkable. And to sit and think about a few people that commit to praying around the clock and that it lasted for 100 years. I as we've been preparing for this recording, I've just wondered, maybe there's some out there that you could organize a ministry to pray for 100 days around the clock. If the Moravians did 100 years, what might God do if we took 100 days and we helped to foster signups and prayer, continuous prayer for 100 days for the unreached. So there's all sorts of things that God wants to do, and He uses our prayers, and it is such it is the most valuable resource that we have as mobilizers. And maybe you're struggling in your mobilization ministry right now. Maybe you are thinking of quitting and giving up. Prayer is our best and our most valuable resource. And so, Kevin, I know that you, through Christ Connection, that you work to encourage missions in churches as you travel and as you teach on prayer. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, there's multiple levels. I mean, again, going back to being a missionary kid, it's just in my heart. And I actually have this is kind of a side thing with the ministry. I have a spreadsheet with 50 missionaries on it that I just work through and reach out to and pray for and, try and support. It's not anything official or anything like that. Just reach out and send an email every once in a while saying I'm praying for you, anything specific I can pray for, just because having been on the other side, I know that some of those emails come at just the right time, and you're like,
that's right.
This is kind of a side thing here that I just thought of that I should throw in here. But as a missionary kid,
sure.
I remember it was a tough time. There was a curfew in our place, and and I don't have time to tell the whole story, but the short story is we heard music coming out from the rice field over to where our house was, and it was Christian songs, and we were in a country with 1% Christian population, and it was in English, and there wasn't a lot of English-speaking people, and if they were, they spoke British English, but it was American English that was coming out, and all night long that music went, and and no one else in our neighborhood heard it but our family, and either it was mass delusion or I think God sent His angels to sing for us one night, and I think about the people who prayed for us back home, and they may not have known why they were praying. They may not have, but you hear those stories. I was on the other end of that, one of those stories where God intervened, and so the simple things of we try and go to, and not right now with COVID, but I mean we want to go to be with missionaries and take trips. Our goal ultimately is 3 trips a year. We go to speak at missions conventions and things like that to just focus on the prayer side of that, and just telling the stories. When I'm teaching on prayer, I'm telling mission stories because that's who I am. Because part, again, just it's kind of my hobby horse here, but people think prayer is boring because they don't connect it to the bigger picture. And so if I'm teaching people on prayer, if they realize that I can pray and a missionary around the world can have a spiritual encounter, that's a little more interesting than praying for my aunt's hangnail. That's what I want to get involved in that, and some people are looking for that battle to go after. And so when I teach on prayer, even if it's not a prayer specific thing, a mission specific thing, I want to get people excited about the bigger picture of what the adventure with Jesus can really be about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was at a prayer meeting once, and they were going around taking prayer requests, and I think most of them were about prayer for healing, which is not bad. It's good. The Bible commands us to do that. But it got to me, and I said, I want to lighten things up here a little bit. So they said, Dave, you have any prayer requests? And I said, I'd like to pray for the Fulani in Nigeria. They're an unreached people group. They most of them don't know anything about Jesus at all. And the tension in the room, it just got really weird. And, I remember thinking, because they were taking personal prayer requests. Well, it's very personal that these people groups don't know Jesus, right? And so I want to make that the norm. Let's make this the norm, that 60, 70, 80% of our prayer requests are for the salvation of loved ones, or for the unreached, or for other missionaries, right? And like you're saying, let's put the big picture in view here, even at our prayer meetings. And there's all sorts of resources. We've got a section on our website, missionarymobilization.org. If you click on mobilization resources, there's a whole section on prayer and Bible study there. There's the Unreached app, Unreached People Group of the Day app by Joshua Project. And so there's Light the Window, and there's Prayercast, and there's just numerous. And we'll put all these links on our website where you can go, the show notes to this episode. So, Kevin, if our listeners would like to know more about you and your ministry with Christ Connection, how can they do that?
Well, probably the main place would be to go to christconnection.cc, so like Christ Connection. And that will have all the resources. We have all sorts of things to help you with your prayer life, and we have the podcast there as well, where I interview people or to just learn about growing in your prayer life. I have prayer episodes where we just talk about how to pray and enjoy it, or I model it for people. So, but christconnection.cc has been the main place I'd send people to, because all the resources and links are there.
Excellent. We're going to link to that as well. And don't forget, coming up on May 23rd this year, May 23rd, 2021, it's the National Day for the Unreached. And we're going to be praying. You can visit alliancefortheunreached.org to get information. It's Pentecost Sunday. I love that the National Day for the Unreached is on Pentecost Sunday, because the Spirit was poured out to empower us for witness to the nations. And so don't forget the National Day for the Unreached coming up on May 23rd here in just a few weeks. And if you'd like to learn more about missions mobilization, we'd like to introduce you to Trinity Bible College and Graduate School's Master of Arts Intercultural Studies. It's got an optional track or concentration in missions mobilization. So this degree is specifically designed for missionaries, missions pastors, and agency mobilizers. We even offer one free grad class for missionaries. So visit trinitybiblecollege.edu for more information, or you can email me at hello@missionarymobilization.org. Kevin, we squeezed a lot of resources and some pretty awesome stuff about mobilizing prayer into the show today. It's been great having you. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. This is a great resource that you're doing as well.
Well, praise the Lord. It's all because we want to keep praying for more laborers to work in His harvest fields. And so until next time, that's what we're going to be praying for, more laborers to work in His harvest fields. Take care.
You've been listening to the Missionary Mobilization Podcast. a ministry of the Center for Missionary Mobilization and Retention at Trinity Bible College and Graduate School. You can access free resources online at missionarymobilization.org. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Missionary Mobilization. Thanks for listening.